All right. Welcome to Mercy and Truth Bible Church. Today is the beautiful 16th of April, 2023. And as I like to say, we are one day closer to our redemption. So, we are continuing. This will be our part 5 of the Crucifixion elaborated. And when we last left our intrepid Savior, he was back before Pilate, after having been dragged before Pilate the first time. And then when Pilate found out that he was a Galilean, he said, hey, no problem. He's not under my jurisdiction. Transfer him to Herod. So he transferred him to Herod. And of course, Herod, it's like he wouldn't talk to Herod because, well, there's a lot of reasons he wouldn't talk to Herod, but, Herod is chief amongst sinners. So he didn't have anything to say to Herod. But in typical political fashion, Herod takes Messiah, as I call it, the Messiah hot potato, and he passes it back to Pilate because he understands that Messiah, or a person called Messiah, right, is a religious hot potato, and that if he starts executing people that are calling themselves Messiah, they're going to be in trouble with the masses. So he's like, I don't want anything to do with it, throws it back to Pilate. So remember, we read that part about Pilate's wife and how she told him to have nothing to do with that just man. So from this point forward, he's been seeking for a way to release him. Now remember, we're in the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the glorious Roman occupiers of Judea, have this carrot they like to throw out once a year at the feast. They have a tradition of magnanimity, right? They release one prisoner. Oh, you can have one prisoner back, and that's just we're your glorious overseers. So we'll give you one guy back. So Pilate sees his opening. Pilate takes and says, oh, you know what? Since we got to give somebody back, here is a perfect opportunity now that I can get myself and extricate me out of this religious situation which he didn't want to be in. Okay, because it really is. It's a religious argument. Remember, the priests have brought Jesus to the forefront and have brought him before the secular governor. Okay, so the two, there's no separation of church and state in their minds, and so this is what we end up having. So Pilate's thought process is, if I place before them the worst murderer that we have, that's accused essentially of the same thing, which would be sedition, right? Sedition to the Roman government, right? Then they'll obviously make the choice because Jesus hasn't done anything, right? So you got a choice of Barabbas, a sedition murderer, or the guy who's been walking around and healing people from the sick and curing the blind and casting out devils for the last 3.5 years, all over the territory, right? Basically for the benefit of the common people. So it should be an easy choice, right? Not so much. So let's go to Matthew. Let's start, and we'll start reading Matthew's account. And go back to Matthew 27, verse 21. So we're going to see here how each one of the Gospels records these specific events. And so I thought I'd get through it again today, but I'm not. We're going to have one more episode, maybe two. So I think I can get through it finally next week. But we're going to go through each one of the gospel accounts, and we're going to finally piece together all these little pieces of information that we've neglected. So Matthew 27, verse 21, it says, the governor answered and said unto them, whether of the twain, and remember, twain for Old English is two, will ye, that's all y'all, that I release unto you? They said, Barabbas. Pilate saith unto them, now Pilate scratched and said, what? What shall I do then with Jesus who is called the Christ? Okay. They all they all say unto him, let him be crucified. And the governor said, why? What evil hath he done? But they cried out the more, saying, let him be crucified. So they want the death penalty for Jesus Christ. So at this point in the story here, you've got to understand that Pilate is completely confused. It's the holy priests that have brought a man before him accused first of violating the Jews' religious laws. All right? But they couldn't support the charges to make that stick. Then they charge him with sedition against the Roman Empire. But after being examined by both Pilate and Herod, neither of these two charges have any supportive evidence to prove any such accusation. So naturally, Pilate wants to release him. So he offers them up. He offers them up in front of the crowd, and the crowd is screaming they want to crucify him because the crowd's being stirred up by the priests. Mob mentality has taken over. So let's pick it up again in verse 24 here. When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing. So if you've ever understood a mob mentality, right, when people start screaming, whatever it is they're screaming, right? There's videos online right now of some conservative people, judges that went to talk to universities, things like that. The mob gets up and they start screaming, F you, blank, 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 and they get this chant. And no matter how he puts his hands up, tries to stop, it's just they're stuck. They're stuck. Okay? Satanic influence takes over, and the mob mentality controls, and it controls. But that rather a tumult was made. He took water, washed his hands before the multitude, all right, in witness of all of them, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this judged person, see ye to it. So Pilate, in view of all the people, okay, you're in the praetorium here, so you're in like this amphitheater, all right, with a mob. He ceremonially washes his hands of this kangaroo court, this travesty. And he hands the fate of Jesus over to this Jewish mob. See ye to it. So Pilate says, he's all in y'all's hands. In other words, he says, take him. I can't charge him. You want to kill him? You kill him. Count me out. That's basically what he's saying. He says, I'm done. He says, this guy's innocent. I've proven him innocent. Now, notice that no matter what other sins Pilate has committed in his life, he's done one thing correctly. He's judged Jesus correctly. Now, that's an interesting concept. So sin should not be imputed to Pilate for finding Jesus innocent. However, Pilate has one big sin in this whole morass and thing that he will be charged with. And that is the sin of cowardice. Okay? He turns Jesus over to the mob. All right? So remember, you are a governor of the people. You have to do what's right. Okay? So, you see this all the time in old Western movies, right? Some of the John Wayne Western movies, they make good of it. They're holed up in the jail, and the bad guys are on the outside, right? And they want to get the guy that's inside. But they're going to wait for the judge to come and hang him, right? But they don't want that, right? But the good guys hold out until help arrives. But that's not the way Pilate sees it. But you know what? You want him here? He's yours. Take him. Get him out of here. I want to be done with it. He goes after the political solution. So the sin that Pilate will be judged for at, the judgment throne of Christ, his chief sin will be cowardice. Okay? And we all know what happens to cowards. Cowards don't go to heaven. So don't make that mistake, by the way. Don't make cowardice one of the sins that is accounted against you. Verse 25. Mark these words carefully. Then answered all the people and said, His blood be on us and our children. Then released he Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. So remember, words are important, as we've stressed here multiple times. So we've got a mob of Jews who were whipped into frenzy by the priests. Scripture says all the people. Now you may ask, well, does that mean the apostles and Mary too? They were there. Well, no, because they weren't technically part of the mob, right? They weren't part of the mob shouting. So Christianity is a thinking man's religion. So when he says all, his all is encompassing the mob, not the group of people that didn't want this to happen. So you've got to think about it in order to draw a righteous conclusion with what's said. Now notice, after the judgment, Jesus gets scourged, and scourging was done to weaken the flesh so that you died quickly on the cross. Otherwise, you could linger for multiple hours and maybe even days. So, the judgment is made, his hands are washed, he then sentences him to be scourged and then crucified. Okay? So now Pilate releases him to the soldiers for execution. So the Jewish priests who had kept him and brought him before Pilate, hand their Messiah over to the murder machine known as the Roman Empire for the grand finale. Notice verse 27. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the common hall, and we find out later that's called a praetorium, and gathered unto him the whole band of soldiers. So now they're going to have a little bit of fun, okay? And they stripped him and put on a scarlet robe. And when they had plaited crown of thorns, they put it upon his head and reed in his right hand, and they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they spit on him, took the reed, and smote him on the head. So a prisoner is handed over to battle-hardened soldiers. Now these guys, you've got to remember, are in the professional Roman army. So they've probably seen countless battles and have killed dozens of people. And it's become a sport to them. Their mind is seared. Their conscience is seared. That's what they're trained to do. They're trained to kill people. That's what a Roman legionnaire does. Once their mindset is cast, they follow orders. Kill, kill, kill. Remember Arlo Guthrie? All right? That's what a Roman soldier is taught to do. Okay? So now they're handed a prisoner, okay, an enemy of the empire whom they serve. And they're told that this enemy is King of the Jews, and that he has no respect for the empire, right? They're told to scourge him and then to take him out and kill him. So, unlike any other soldier in history, they decide to have a little sport with this guy because they don't know who he is. They don't understand who he truly is, because they're just run-of-the-mill foot soldiers. So now we need to pick up a little bit more of the story. So let's jump into Mark and see what Mark talks about this. We're going to, as each one of these gospel accounts, Mark 15, we're going to piece together more and more of the picture that went on here. Mark 15, verses 6 to 18. Now at the feast he released unto them one prisoner, whomsoever they desired. And there was one named Barabbas, which lay bound with them that had made insurrection with him, who had committed murder in the insurrection. So Barabbas was a murderer and an insurrectionist. Kind of like what they wanted you to believe about the January 6th people, but wasn't quite true. You ever notice that they're taking a page out of the playbook of the Roman Empire? That's just a freebie there for you. Notice that Barabbas is accused of the same crime that Jesus Christ, that the Jews had leveled against Jesus Christ. Insurrection against Rome. First it was blasphemy against God, and then, Pilate didn't want anything else. Like, what do I care? You take him. You deal with your own laws. No, he's an insurrectionist against Rome. He said that, don't pay your taxes. And this was Caiaphas who accused him in front of Pilate. Verse 8. And the multitude, crying aloud, began to desire him to do as he had ever done unto them. But Pilate answered them, saying, Will ye that I release unto you the King of the Jews? For he knew that the chief priests had delivered him for envy. So during this trial, this mock trial, during this exchange, he starts to figure out, oh, wait a minute. These priests are delivering this guy because he's threatening their power, because he's a religious guy, and people are following him and not them. Pilate is able to discern this, so you got to give him a little credit for that. The chief priests are envious of the religious authority that Jesus has managed to gather, and really shown them to be false prophets or false teachers. Interesting. Verse 11. But the priests moved the people that he should rather release Barabbas unto them. So you need to think about this very carefully. The priests move the people, that is, the leaders of what is becoming a false religion, the way they exercise it, using their authority wielded improperly to convict an innocent man to death. Pilate sees this. Verse 12. And Pilate answered and said again unto them, What will ye then that I should do unto him whom ye call the King of the Jews? So, okay. All right, you want me to release Barabbas? All right. You can get your wish, but what am I going to do with this guy Jesus? And they cried out again, Crucify him! Then Pilate said unto them, Why? What evil hath he done? Right? Give me a reason. Give me a reason why I should crucify an innocent man. And they cried out more exceedingly, Crucify him! Here's the sin. Here's Pilate's sin of cowardice. And so Pilate, willing to content the people, released Barabbas unto them, and delivered Jesus, when he had scourged him, to be crucified. Cowardice. Just wanting to get along. Just wanting to find that political solution. We don't have to do what's right. You see, we suffer from the same problem in this Laodicean age. People, specifically politicians, don't have a backbone anymore. They don't want to do what's right. Whatever people says, mob rule. Oh, we want more money. We want free money. Okay, we'll give you free money. We want reparations. Oh, okay, we'll give you reparations. Whatever you want. Whatever you want. We're going to content the people. Because if we keep you content, you give us power, and we can do whatever we want, and it doesn't matter. That's what's going on here. Turn to Mark. Mark 15. Oh, we're in Mark, sorry. Verse 16. I should say, continuing along to verse 16 of Mark 15. And the soldiers led him away into the hall called Praetorium. Okay, so the great hall is called the Praetorium. And they called together the whole band, and they clothed him in purple. Now, let's take a quick second here. If you know anything about ancient times, dyed clothes are something that is very opulent. In other words, you've got to be rich to own dyed clothes. The most expensive is the dye purple. Because as we've talked before, we talked about Lydia, and she was up in, what's the city Lydia was in the book of Acts. But she was a seller of purple. Purple is a very expensive dye. It's made of seashells or something. I forgot exactly what it's made of, but it costs big bucks. So here is this perfect purple robe, okay, that obviously the soldiers had absconded with it from somebody. They had taken it off some rich Jew somewhere, right? And because they wouldn't have obviously put it on him if it had cost them something. So, and they clothed him with purple and plaited a crown of thorns and put it about his head and began to salute him. Hail, King of the Jews! Mocking him, right? They mocked him. But think about that, right? You see pictures of Jesus with this crown of thorn on his head. The thorns stick into your head. That's the whole point, right? So they're essentially torturing the guy, and they're making jest of him. Notice what they're mocking him for. His title, right? King of the Jews. Note that the emperor to them is the guy who rules supreme. He's the guy, and to a soldier, power is what it's all about, right? He who rules is the one who has the power. So everything they had lived for or with up to this point is all centered around power. I've often told a lot of people, too, about in engineering, the world I come from, everything always centers about power, right? We could have all the marvelous things of the world of science fiction if we could just get a power source that was of a high energy density. All the things of Star Trek, everything like that could come true. That's the dream of a politician, right? That's the satanic dream. If I have the ultimate power, right, then I can tell you what to do, and you can't object, right? You can't hold me accountable for anything, right? That's what a politician wants. Yeah. These soldiers now have power temporarily in their hands over the God of the universe. Turn to Luke 23. In Luke 23:13, Dr. Luke here gives us a little bit of a different slant on things. And he's going to start to fill in some of the pieces of the puzzle. Remember, each one of these gospel accounts, somebody has a piece of the puzzle. And I know we're going back to the beginning of the sentence and then working through again, but you're going to find a little bit more and a little bit more each time. Luke 23, verse 13. And Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people, so it wasn't just the priests, but it was the rulers of the people. So there are people in administrative power that are also bringing Jesus forth. Said unto them, Ye have brought this man unto me as one that perverteth the people. Okay, that's the charge, perverting the people. And behold, I have examined him before you. Okay? Have found no fault in this man, touching those things whereof ye accuse him. No, nor yet Herod. For I sent you to him, and lo, nothing, think about that, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. So according to Luke, Dr. Luke, Pilate, out of his own mouth, Jesus was brought to Pilate as one that perverteth the people. Is that a charge? Right? Oh, I wish we could charge people with that today, right? Wouldn't that be great? We'd have, 90% of the friggin' country locked up and the streets would be nice and cleaned up. Oh, you're perverting the nation, right? Bud Light comes to mind, but anyway, let's move on. Verse 16. I will therefore chastise him, chastise him, and release him. Parenthetically, it says, for of necessity he must release one unto them at the feast, right? We've covered that. And they cried out all at once, saying, away with this man, and release unto us Barabbas. For a certain sedition made in the city, and for murder, was cast into prison. So you got a murderer and a sedition, you're going to trade the king of the Jews. We've gone over that. But notice how he says it. All at once a cry. It's mob rule. It's mob rule. Be aware as a Christian. Stay away from mobs. I don't care what the mob is. Stay away from them. Nothing good ever comes out of a mob. Ever. You'll get carried away in the moment with the satanic spirit of some type of a mob protesting something. January 6th is a perfect example. Everybody went there to peacefully protest, and there were rabble-rousers in there, and now people are in jail. You have a right in this country to petition freely for the redress of your grievances. But invariably, mobs end up going awry. Verse 20. Pilate, therefore, willing to release Jesus. So here it is. Pilate is willing to release Jesus. He wants them to go. He says, I'm not going to convict this guy. Spake again to them, but they cried, crucify him, crucify him. And he said unto them the third time, why? What evil has he done? I have found no cause of death in him. All right? So Pilate, you can envision this, and if you watch The Passion of the Christ, you can kind of see he tries to play it up there a little bit. You're trying to argue with a mob. Why should I crucify him? What has he done? Tell me. What? Crucify him, right? They're just worked in a lather. I will therefore chastise him and let him go. And they were instant with loud voices, requiring that he might be crucified. No, we don't want you to whip an innocent man. We want you to crucify him. And the voices of them and of the chief priests prevailed. And Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required. So notice in verse 22 it says, and he said unto them the third time. 3 times Pilate asked them. You ever heard this term, 3 strikes and you're out? Ever wonder where it comes from? You see, everything goes back to the Bible, whether you realize it or not. Right? Even like our baseball games, where do they get 3 strikes? Well, here it is. It has its basis in Scripture. Herod and Pilate had found no crime worthy of death in him. So we're going to take a look at the last gospel here, John. Now remember, John is a gospel of the Spirit of God. He looks at Jesus as a more in a godly fashion. He looks at him as the Son of God, okay? And he's going to start to fill in some more of these details that Mark, Luke, and Matthew don't quite touch on. So if you go to John chapter 19, verse 1. I know, we got to go back again. We got to start at the beginning again and start over again. A fourth time. Remember, we read something. If you read something the first time, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. And you read it the second time, oh, no. Well, the fourth time, hopefully you'll have memorized the events. And now we're going to expand and we're going to encompass everything that went on so you can get a picture from these four independent witnesses of the things that happened. Then Pilate, therefore, took Jesus and scourged him. Okay, so we're just a little bit further down the road path here. So Jesus gets scourged, and the soldiers plaited a crown of thorns put on his head, and they put on him a purple robe, and said, "Hail, King of the Jews," and they smote him with their hands. So now they're pummeling him too. You know, that wasn't in the other Gospels. So Pilate had washed his hands of the affair. He had sent Jesus off to be scourged, whereupon soldiers abused him and scourged him. Now, notice, Jesus is brought back after the scourging in front of Pilate. A last chance, if you will. Okay? One last chance. So really, this is almost the fourth time now. It is the fourth time. So here we see the final end of the interaction between Christ and Pilate. Verse 4. Therefore, Pilate therefore went forth again and said unto them, Behold, I bring him forth to you, that ye may know that I find no fault in him. Okay? I find no fault in him. Then came Jesus forth, wearing a crown of thorns and purple robe, and Pilate said unto them, Behold the man. Why did he say that? Why would he say that? Well, because he's taken this torturous abuse, and he's innocent. He hasn't cried out against his accusers. He hasn't railed. He hasn't pointed fingers. He's just said, okay. He's resigned to his fate. They don't understand why, but Pilate is amazed that Jesus takes this punishment without a railing accusation. So Pilate basically pronounces him innocent in front of the crowd so that there is no mistake. There's no mistake that Pilate deems him innocent in his verdict. Notice verse 6, and here we go. When the chief priests, therefore, an officer saw him, they cried out, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate said unto them, Take ye him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God. So now they're covering their fanny. Well, the reason we want him killed is because we have a law, and you can't say that you're the Son of God. Well, what if you were the Son of God? See, there's a flaw in the logic. You can't say you're the Son of God. The problem is he was the Son of God, and he is the Son of God. Remember that Pilate is a polytheistic God worshiper of this Roman pantheon. Notice that when Jesus calls himself a God, notice his reaction. Hold on. Sorry. Verse 8. Actually, I'll take that back. When the chief priests said, he made himself the Son of God. This is news to Pilate. This is new. He said, whoa, wait a minute. Notice the reaction that we have in verse 8 now. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was more afraid. It's like, oh, hold on, this is different. You didn't tell me that he claimed to be the Son of God. You told me that he was perverting the nation. You told me that he was a seditionist traitor against Rome. You didn't tell me that this man claimed to be the Son of God. You see, in Roman hierarchies, right, if you know anything about mythology, you realize that the gods sometimes manifest themselves as people and come down and fornicate with women and do all sorts of things. So for a Roman soldier to hear this, now it's a potential possibility. Well, wait a minute, right? Because Pilate knows that this guy has been healing people all over or at least has been reported to have healed people all over the territory of all sorts of diseases. So now he called himself Son of God. Pilate's like, wait a minute, stop. So he comes over and he went again into the judgment hall and said unto Jesus, whence art thou? And whence means what place? In other words, it's a stupid question, right? But it's not if you're thinking in a Roman mindset, right? Where did the gods come from? They came from Mount Olympus, right? So he says, whence art thou from? Are you from Mount Olympus by any chance? Right? That's what he's asking him. Everybody knows he's from Nazareth, right? But suddenly, Pilate now, he's starting to think, he's beginning to question the origins of this man. Because there's too many reports throughout the kingdom here that this guy has healed people over and over and over again, and even the Jews can't account for it. Could he really be a god? This is what's going on in Pilate's mind. But Jesus gave him no answer. So now, why didn't Jesus give him an answer? Because it's self-evident, right? Before, Pilate, when he was asking questions, was asking legitimate questions, And so he's already pronounced sentence. We're already going out the door to get crucified, and all of a sudden he stops and says, hey, wait a minute, where are you from? It's the stupidest question ever. I'm like, you should have asked that at the beginning there, boss. All right? Then saith Pilate unto him, speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have the power to crucify thee and have the power to release thee? Now this is a marvelous statement. Jesus answered, thou couldst have no power at all against me except it were given thee from above. Therefore, notice the words, therefore he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin. So Pilate's guilty of a sin, but the guy that turned me over to you has the greater sin, Judas. Okay? The unpardonable sin we talked about there. Okay? Now, you wouldn't know it unless you read later on in the books, but we'll see later in the book of Romans that the Apostle Paul expands on this understanding. So it's worthy to note, turn to Romans chapter 13. Keep your finger in John here, but turn to Romans chapter 13, verse 1. And while you do that, I'm going to take my allergy pill. 13, verse 1. Because it's important to establish something that we have completely lost our understanding of in this miserable day and age that we live. Romans 13:1 says, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God, the powers that be are ordained of God. Simply put, God is in control of power. He gives it to unto whom he wants, good or evil, to fulfill his will. Pilate thinks that Caesar has given him his power, right? That's his world that he lives in, right? But he's quickly being schooled by the Messiah here that it's God that has given him his power. That is, both Caesar and Pilate have received power from God. And as a Christian, we need to understand this. No matter what type of miserable world we live in, we are ambassadors to this world. Well, I'm a U.S. citizen. Well, you know, technically, once you professed your belief in Jesus Christ, you're no longer a U.S. citizen. You are an ambassador of Jesus Christ. You are an ambassador of the kingdom of God. And you need to remember that. And you need to conduct yourself accordingly. And that's easy to say for me, right? It's not easy. God is in control of everything. No matter how much the facade of man's government pretends that God can change it in an instant. Okay? Verse 12. And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, here it is now, here's why Pilate is coward. Thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus forth, sat down in the judgment seat in a place that is called the Pavement, but in the Hebrew, Gabbatha. So basically, the Jewish priests, you know, they're very astute at manipulating the law. They paint him into a legal corner. Okay? If he doesn't act courageously, there's only one path out for him. And that's why I said Pilate's a coward, because we know the path Pilate took. He was a coward. He said, all right, crucify him. And it was the preparation, verse 14, and it was the preparation of the Passover. Preparation day for the Passover. This day is the preparation day. We're still here. I'm sorry, you know, we're still here. But he's about to be nailed to the cross, but we're still here. Okay? So this is the early morning. So we're right here now. This is where we are. We're going to get to him carrying his cross. It's called a preparation day because the high Sabbath, the first day of unleavened bread, is the next day. So every time you have a high Sabbath, the previous day is called a preparation day. And about the 6th hour he said unto the Jews, Behold your king. Now, anybody got an idea what the 6th hour is? In the Jewish language, when does the first hour start? When the sun rises. So the 6th hour would be noon. 6 hours plus from sun up 6 a.m. to 12, noon is 6 hours, right? So the 6th hour is noon. Okay, so now we have a time frame. So now we know that, you know, Jesus was scourged and he's at Pilate at 12 noon. And he said unto the Jews, Behold your king. Pilate seems to be convinced now. But they cried out, Away with him, crucify him. Pilate said unto them, Shall I crucify your king? Again, remember the Roman pantheon, right? This now suddenly isn't a threat to Pilate because Jesus is claiming to be king of the Jews, not king of the Roman Empire. So he doesn't care. So Pilate's figured it out in this short amount of time. So he recognizes that this guy in front of him is a holy man. He's king in the sense of a religious hierarchy. The high priest, essentially, right? So Pilate starts to realize he's not a political threat to me at all. The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." "Oh, really? Then delivered he him, therefore, unto them to be crucified." Okay. So now it's time in our little episode here to talk about the sin of the Jewish nation, specifically based on what was just said. I want to be very clear about this to anybody that's watching, especially if you're a Jewish person and you just happen to tune into this channel. This is not some anti-Semitic rant, okay? This is just stating the facts of life as they have occurred and as has been recorded in these gospel accounts. 3 times, Pilate offered the Jewish mob that was present, including the leaders and the priests, as it's been recorded, and people from all walks of society, the opportunity to release Jesus Christ, who was, as we know, the Messiah. And how should they have known that he was the Messiah? By the miracles that he did over the previous 3.5 years, which he did in public. Everybody was witnessing to it. Even Pilate here now recognizes, yeah, this guy's king of the Jews. Okay? But what did they say? "We have no king but Caesar." Then answered all the people that were present of the mob, right? "We've got no king but Caesar. His blood be on us and our children." That's a problem. So they accept the blood guilt of the execution of the Messiah, not only for their generation, but of all their children. How's that? How'd you like your dad to drag you into that one? Hey, you know what? From now on, you're going to be dragged into this blood guilt with us. They swore fealty to Rome. So this brings up a couple of points here. I'm going to read a couple of things here that are going to blow your mind here. The descendants of those present in that mob have their blood guilt of Jesus tied to their family lineage. It's a stain on their family lineage. They are now perpetual servants of Rome by their own confession, and it's a blood oath. The blood of Messiah. They swore on the blood of Messiah, and it can only be broken by Messiah. That, you need to consider that. So, we see later that in the book of Acts, there are also Jews who reject the Holy Spirit, as witnessed by Stephen. They ended up stoning him. So there was a mob of people, right? First in the Praetorium there, in this area, in the amphitheater. So they condemn him. And then the Spirit of God speaks through the apostle, and they stone him. And later, Paul witnesses to them throughout the empire, and they reject him. So John the Baptist is a type of the Father. Jesus Christ is obviously the Son, the Messiah. And the Holy Spirit, through Stephen, the apostle, okay, all 3 of them, 3 rejections of God. And so for this rejection of God 3 times, they have now taken on the blood guilt of their Messiah. Then answered all the people and said, his blood be on us and on our children. So when you look at history, as it involves the Jewish people, the Jewish nations, what do you find? Is this a truth? Is this a truthful statement? Does this have any ramifications for the Jewish nation across history? Well, let's find out. In AD 70, Titus, the Roman general, sacked Jerusalem. He burned down the temple and he murdered all that were in Jerusalem. Okay? And then the rest of the Jews that were in that area were scattered across the globe. We call it the diaspora, right? That's a fact. That's a hard and ruled fact. Now, you don't know much up until about the 1066. In 1066, there was a massacre in Spain called the Granada Massacre, where a whole bunch of Jews were massacred. Didn't like Jews. During the first Crusades of 1096, the Rhineland massacres occurred along the Danube and the Rhine rivers, which are major waterways. They're the superhighways that you can take and you can end up, getting close to Crimea and then jumping into the Holy Land, right? Well, the Crusaders, as they came through, they massacred all the Jews. In Fez, in 1276, which is Morocco, there was a massive Jewish massacre. Apparently the Islamics didn't like them either. During the Second Crusade in 1146, the Jews in France were murdered. In Fez, again in 1465, there was a Jewish massacre. In 1250 and 1320, after King Louis IX of France was captured in Egypt by the Islamists, an army was raised to defeat the heathens, but instead they decided to massacre the Jews in northern France. Close enough, right? The infidels. In 1290, all the Jews were expelled from England by order of King Edward I. And that stayed in effect until 1657, when Oliver Cromwell overturned that order and allowed Jews to come back in. In 1396, all Jews were expelled from France. In 1421, the Jews were expelled from Austria, and they fled to Poland. In 1482, all Jews were expelled from Spain and forced to convert to Roman Catholicism. We have no king but Caesar. Converting to Roman Catholicism. You see the connection? Hope so. From 1300s to the 1600s, the Jews were blamed for the Black Plague. In Strasbourg, 900 Jews were burnt alive. In 1700, all Jews were expelled from Yemen in what's called the Mawazwa exile. In all the papal states in Italy, the Jews were required to live in ghettos up until 1870. Italy brutally persecuted the Jews. In 1806, by decree in Yemen, Jews were required to carry the dead carcasses away and clean latrines on Saturday. Now, if you know anything, Saturday's the Sabbath. This stayed in effect until, guess what year? 1950. The Islamic Caliphate made them pay a yearly tax and live as a second-class citizen known as a dehimis. I think that's the way you pronounce it. In Morocco, they were condemned. When a condemned man was executed, the Jews or the Christians were rounded up as executioners, and they were made to extract and salt the brains of the condemned and place them on public display. A massacre occurred of the Jews in 1828, in Barfursh in 1867. Riots against the Jews in Palestine occurred in 1920, 1921, and 1929. And who could forget World War II, the extermination of 6 million Jews or more by the Nazi regime. In the 40s and 50s, the population of Jews in North Africa was reduced, this is in the 40s and the 50s, folks, from 900,000 to 8,000. So the moral of the story here is when you make a deal with the devil and you crucify your Messiah that was sent to liberate you, there are consequences. Out of their own mouths, they didn't just condemn their generation, they condemned their children's generations. A foolish, foolish, foolish curse by their own mouth. Be careful what you say. Words matter. God holds you accountable for your words. So we're going to go over one more page here. Go back to Luke 23, because I wanted to cover just a little bit more. And he released unto them him for that sedition and murder was cast into prison, whom they had desired. But he delivered Jesus to their will. And as they led him away, this is Luke 23, verse 25, sorry. And as they led him away, they laid hold upon one Simon a Cyrenian, coming out of the country, and on him they laid the cross that he might bear it after Jesus. So remember, Jesus has been scourged. He's in a weakened state, so he needed help carrying his cross. So the Romans impressed this poor guy who was just walking along the street, Simon the Cyrenian, right? And verse 20 says, and there followed him a great company of people and of women, which also bewailed and lamented. So there's a bunch of folks, a whole bunch of women, walking behind Jesus as this guy is carrying his cross. Why? Why women? Why are women following Jesus? Well, it's because Jesus taught men how women ought to be treated. This was something new in Jewish society. This is something that the Pharisees had failed at dismally. Women were second-class citizens according to the Pharisee, and that's not true. And that's one of the problems we have in this country today, is we don't properly hold up the women the way we did years ago. They had long forgotten that the second commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself, regardless of whether it's a woman or a man. Verse 28, but Jesus turning unto them said, daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. Haha, there it is, right? Weep for your children. Why? Because they're going to partake in this curse. For behold, the days are coming in which they shall say, blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bare, and the paps which never gave suck. Then shall they begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and to the hills cover us. For if they do these things in a green tree, what shall be done in a dry? Now you're like, what are you talking about? Well, it's interesting. Peter Ruckman used Scripture to reference the two trees in this quote. Now, the green tree is Israel in its heyday in a nation, right? So in Ezekiel 17:23, you don't have to go there, I'll read it to you, because I know we're running out of time here. In the mountain of the height of Israel will I plant it, and it will bring forth boughs and bear fruit, and be a goodly cedar. And unto it shall dwell all fowl of every wing. In the shadow of the branches, therefore, shall thee dwell. Okay, so there's the green tree, right? That's the nation of Israel. It's prospering. Now, the dry tree, according to Ruckman, would be Israel at the time of the second advent. at the end of the tribulation. And he quotes Hosea 9, verse 10. I found Israel like grapes in the wilderness. I saw your fathers as first ripe in the fig tree of their time. But they went to Baal Peor and separated themselves unto shame, and their abominations were according as they loved. Now, for those who don't know, Baal Peor is involved with the sexual sins of Israel. Not unlike we have today, and not like what's going on in Israel today. So I find these two comparisons of the trees by Ruckman a reasonable assertion. But I think I'm going to step forward. In my opinion, I'm going to give you something that you should also consider. The green tree, I think, also refers to the 3.5 years of Christ's preaching while he's in Israel in the troublous times. Because remember, Jesus Christ is life. So as long as Christ is there, the Messiah is there, the tree is green. And the dry tree would be at the end of the age in the 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation. Me personally, I think we can add that to this analogy. So notice carefully that Christ, as he's being led to his crucifixion, a so-called criminal, convicted by the priests and the Jewish mob, they're all out there jeering him, except for the people that are following. His followers are lamenting, and the women are bewailing. Now, modern-day women should take a careful note. Jesus, as he taught the Jews about the intent of the law, not just the letter, he held up women in a high esteem. All other religions of the world do not treat women like Christians treat their women. Christian women are cherished and protected and given privilege and opportunity. But that's not so in other religions. His teaching was different. It was not the norm of the day. He taught the way it should be, not the way they wanted it to be. So the women followed after him, weeping, because they knew once he was gone, it's going to fall back to the old ways. Okay, so it looks like we're going to have part 6 of this. I haven't, we're right here now. We're right up to the point where he's about to get crucified. So we should be able to cover all these by next week. So I hope that elaborates things for you a little bit, and that'll be it, my friends, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.